All right, welcome everybody. We got Ethann Fox on. Looking forward to this. Let's see. Let me just get him up here. Let me unmute him. Hey, Ethann, what's going on?
Hey there, how you doing?
I like that accentuation you have on your face. You look a bit different.
Trying to be more like you.
Right. No, you don't want to do that. It's good to see you. Thanks
You
for coming
too.
in today. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming in today.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We just landed in a place where we could do some consistent broadcasting for the first time in a while. So we were anxious to see what's going on out there. There's been a lot going on since the solstice, since January. And I know you're in the company of a lot of healers, channelers, psychic abilities, the people that you work with there locally, which is kind of ahead of its time as more and more people are coming together in the physical, but you've actually been doing this work in the physical with a group of people up there where you're at. Uh, what kind of uh, what kind of feedback are you getting from your group over these last few weeks?
Oh, a few weeks. Well, I mean, I work with a lot of light workers, yes, and some of them speak at our events, but a lot of my work is focused on helping individuals to transition from more of a mainstream life to more of a spiritually based life, and working in the field of light work in some way. In what respect are you asking that question?
Well, I think, through the individual experiences like you're getting into there, that opens up, some pretty good topics for me. But also in the collective, I mean, what are people picking up? Or if anything, what are they picking up as far as what's happening collectively? Because there's obviously been a lot of transformational energies in place since the first of the year. Uh, I don't want to say they're all over the board, but it seems like we've really moved into a different type of atmosphere in March, and it looks like it's going to continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot more stress in the air, not just in the spiritual circles, because I come from a very mainstream background, so I still keep my hand on the pulse of those kind of things. I wouldn't say I necessarily pay attention to mainstream media or anything like that, but just in the avenues that I used to focus before. So I'm very much aware that, for example, the U.S. stock markets have been declining a lot in the recent weeks, and while that may not seem to apply to those of us who are very much focused in the spiritual world, the markets show us a sign of the emotional state of people, the collective consciousness. And so when those kind of things are occurring, we can say that there's a lot of fear in the world right now. And of course, there's a lot of the even a lot of people in the spiritual circles, I'm surprised, are very much concerned with the virus and things like that. So we are in, or have been in, this state of fear in the recent time period. And not everybody, but certainly a larger portion of the population than even back in December. So I mean, I think that's always an opportunity to transform and to change and to evolve, for people to release that fear and through the experience of it. Although I don't think the experience of the fear is really necessary, it does seem to be how a lot of people deal with their density to process through that and move forward.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I'd like to come back to that, but you'd mentioned something a minute ago in regard to what your work is, which sounds very interesting to me. And I know we've talked about it a little bit before, but I think it might be much more significant now as more and more people are, quote unquote, waking up. I talked to Mary Rodwell a few days ago, and she had some interesting stories. One of them was that she, because of her credibility and, the fact that she's pretty well known, a lot of professionals have been reaching out to her. And she has put together some private groups. These would be doctors and other professionals, where they're actually saying, hey, I'm not ready to come out. It's too much of a threat to my 3D paradigm. But can I talk to some people that are going? Are there other people in my field? And sure enough, for example, she's got a group of doctors that meet privately and talk about I'm getting downloads. I'm having dimensional experiences. I'm getting information in regard to applying things to conventional treatment methods. So this is an encouraging sign. What is that like? I mean, do people come to you and say, I've had a normal life. I need some help making this transition. I mean, that's got to be, and we've all kind of gone through it, but I mean, you've been out there for quite some time. Are you seeing more people stepping forward, and what kind of
Mhm.
experiences are they having, and are you having with them?
Well, that's certainly the case, yes. And I mean, at the moment, there are more people who are wanting to do, I have a light worker program and I'm backed up for quite a number of months at the moment because I don't have the time to work with the number of people who want to do that. So it's just showing how many people are starting to have those awakening experiences. And you mentioned medical doctors. I actually do have a medical doctor in my program right now, and she'll be speaking on our events in the near future. But she comes from a conventional medical background, even has worked in the pharmaceutical industry, developing or helping develop different pharmaceutical drugs. So she comes from a very mainstream background, yet she had a spiritual awakening as well and had to move in a slightly different direction. So today she's still in that field of conventional medicine, but she's combining some very advanced new technologies as well as vibrational healing in conjunction with these things. So, as an example, she works with some cancer patients and people who have very severe cases of illness, in many cases that the conventional medical system has turned away. And she's been able to, because she's has experience in the conventional system as well as the is now developing this whole new spiritual modality. She's able to use the different alternative techniques, but then use conventional methods of testing to see if the cancer is receding or whatever. So she can check the cancer markers. And so far, what she's finding is these alternative methods and vibrational healing modalities that she's developing really are working and are producing better results in many cases than conventional therapies like chemotherapy and so on. And another thing with her is she's also she's been training to essentially do some sort of psychic surgery. So,
Hmm.
as an example, she can now see or feel the difference between different organs in the body, and without doing any sort of a invasive surgery or x-ray, she can tell the difference between a diseased organ and one that's not, and is starting to practice doing sort of a psychic surgery, manipulating the physical body using an energetic approach to it.
Hmm.
So, and the results are very promising, and she's not alone. There are a lot of doctors, and she knows, because she's from that field, she knows a lot of doctors and goes to medical conferences, and there is this huge movement in the medical field, but you wouldn't really know it from the outside because, as you said, with what Mary's experiencing, it's not really looked upon by the medical community as a good thing if you are starting to move in that direction. But it is happening, but it's happening in many cases behind the scenes, and nobody knows that it's occurring. But I'm seeing this happening in all different fields, not just the medical. Many of the people I work with come from all kinds of mainstream professional backgrounds, and they're all having these spiritual experiences and realizing they have to take their life in another direction. In many cases, it's a big 180-degree turn where they have to leave behind what they were doing before and in faith move in a direction that they don't really understand or fully comprehend what direction to go. But they're very extraordinary people that are coming out of this space. So I think a lot of us who have been in this space for a while can get a little discouraged because we don't see those things happening in mainstream news. Doctors coming out and saying these sort of things, um, or even the mainstream news speaking in that sort of way. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not occurring. It's just happening a little bit more privately at the moment.
Yeah,
But eventually it's going to break through.
kind of like our movement. It's
Yeah.
not like mainstream either, but that's good news. And I know from talking to you before, I would imagine you have a, uh, you know, the ability to relate to these people and assist these people because you came out of out of a conventional career and then had your experience and you talk about how I remember last time you talked about how some of the people around you like McKella, that you kind of rely on for their skills and abilities because not all of them are upon you yet. But as an example with this doctor, and you talked about she's starting to utilize the non-conventional means for treatment and identification of illnesses and such. Did she go to someone to learn the psychic surgery along that bent, or did she download this stuff straight, mainline from the infinite intelligence?
Well, what I find and my approach when I work with people is that I don't want them to go to anybody else to learn anything, because I think inside of each of us, we already know what we're here to do. The talents are already there. They don't need to be taught. The problem is we get to, most people, they study a lot of different modalities and they get caught up in those modalities and end up using them as crutches and then forget what they're really here to do. So what I do when I work with somebody like her in this case is when they start working with me, they're not allowed to use any other modality they've learned anywhere. And so what we do is we pull out of them what's uniquely them. So she didn't go to any classes to learn that, but just from what some of the early indicators of what was going on with her, I decided to have her experiment with that. So we just simply asked her to experiment with psychic surgery with some of her conventional medical patients to see if she could see the difference between different kinds of organs, different kinds of illnesses, and then to measure what results we were getting. So in her case, no, it was self-education. It was really more self-awareness than to learn how to do it from somewhere else. Because anytime you learn something from somewhere else, not that learning isn't good, but the learning is always colored by that other person's level of experience or skill in that area, which may be greater than yours in some cases, or maybe less than yours in some cases. In some cases, it's not really what you're meant to do. So I think when you're not limited by another person's perspective or knowledge beyond just a starting point, it lets you grow and expand further to more of who you are. One of the best things that I think helps a person grow in my program is that when they work with me, they have a requirement that they can't use anything they've learned. So that sort of forces out of them what else is there. And usually it's not easy because most people, when they're presented with that, they struggle because nobody really knows what's really them when you strip away everything you've ever learned. But after that initial sort of struggle is over, those things that are authentically you come forward, and that's really where the work is for each person.
Yeah, what a beautiful microcosm of what we're all going through. Get rid of everything and start all over with nothing, and then you have everything. It's interesting, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, like the energy of what you're saying, which is something that is becoming more prominent, which is for lack of a better description, the healer or the practitioner. To your point, not so much laying down a dogmatic method, or straight lines of you've got to do this and you got to do that, where your approach and those of many others seems to be moving towards self-empowerment, and that you're basically not they're doing it themselves. You're just showing them the doors basically, or how to get to a certain place, such as removing everything to empty out the container for everything that you do know. But that sounds like something that I've been picking up on, that more and more people are moving towards. It seems like even those practitioners that have been kind of set in their ways for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think as an example, there are lots of people out there, and I don't think this is a bad thing. Like, for example, if you study Reiki, Reiki is great. A lot of almost everybody in the alternative space, and even people who are just starting to get interested in spirituality or healing find their way to Reiki. Reiki is kind of like a gateway to spirituality and spiritual healing. So it serves a great purpose in that way. But I think for most people, Reiki should just be that. It should just be an entry point, but not a stopping point. So because uh, what the great purpose that Reiki, as an example, has served in our collective consciousness is actually not healing, in my opinion. It's actually bringing people to the idea of energetic healing or vibrational healing. But a lot of people stop there and they don't go any further. And I think going further from there to figure out where you need to go is really where the answer is. So, as an example, we all have infinite ability, of course. As you were saying earlier, I surround myself with a lot of people who have gifts in different areas that I don't currently have. Well, I don't intend or expect that in this lifetime I'm going to be able to channel as well as Michaela Sheldon. She's just very naturally gifted in that area. Not something that I aspire to do, and not something that I think that I will do in this life. But certainly tomorrow, if I wanted to, I could start making YouTube videos and say I'm a channel. And maybe I would be okay at it, but not certainly even remotely as good as most of the good channels out there. So the what I'm trying to get at is we're not all here for the exact same purpose. We all have unique life journeys and contributions we're here to make to the world. And when we find those areas, it'll be an area where we're so good at it that nobody else can do it as well as we can. But I find that, for example, the world is full of Reiki healers. Well, some of them are probably really good at it, but the majority of them probably are really good at something else. But because we get stuck in different things or things that we learn from other people, we stop exploring who we really are and what we're really here to contribute. So, so I think that's really the key, is to do some self-exploration to discover why you're here. And the clues of that are always there throughout your life. As you said, I have a mainstream background. All of the things that I've learned from my lifetime of experience, I'm using in what I'm doing now. So there's really nobody else who could live the life I'm living now, because nobody else has had my experience. But everybody's had their own experience. And if you really look inside of that and to see what have I done with my life, and what have I done that I've done really well that nobody else has done as well as I have, inside of that are probably the answers to what you're uniquely here to contribute that no one else can do. So that's kind of how I approach when I work with somebody, is we try to figure out what makes them special and one of a kind in the world.
Well, that method you just mentioned speaks to me. And I think that's, looking at the experiences you've had within your life, even though they may not look like direct, paths to where you're at, but certainly attributes that would support what you're doing. So as I stand here and I'm listening to you, you're answering a few things and shedding some light for me personally. So I thank you for that. You talked about, I think when you were saying that about, one of the requirements that you have when you work with somebody is that they can't utilize anything that they already have been given, basically, training or whatever that may be. And I think of the old parable, the prodigal son, which basically you've got to lose yourself to find yourself.
Right.
Uh, one of the things I think people are starting to contend with is, what is that voice that is me speaking to me, and what is not? Because so often our mind gets in the way and starts to frame up a narrative. Do you find that when you help a person empty the container, so to speak, lose themselves, and then they start over, do they struggle? Is there a challenge in hearing that still silent voice that is them? Is there anything you can shed light on as to, and through your experience, that might help people kind of have some confidence in what they're hearing and getting?
Well, I think those are two separate questions, because to lose yourself to find yourself is the idea of reaching a state of emptiness, or 0 point, let's say, or There are different terms for it from different backgrounds, but if you reach that state of emptiness, and you can there are many ways to reach that state. It could be done even through meditation over a period of time, can help you to reach that state of emptiness. When you reach that state, there is no difficulty in finding the new path, because the reason most people can't find the right path, not that the path they're on is necessarily right or wrong, because I think we're all where we're supposed to be, but if you want to find your authentic self and what you're uniquely here to contribute in the world, if you reach that place of emptiness and that stillness, then that new path will reveal itself very easily. It's always been there. It's never not been there. It's just been covered up by all of the stuff going on in your environment, in your head, in your community, vibrationally, and so on. So if you can get to that state, then the transition is very natural. And like a lot of people that I've talked to over the years, interviewed on my show, or even worked with as light workers, when they have their big breakthrough to their spiritual gifts and awareness is starting to open up, it's usually after some time of meditation that occurs. It's very, very consistent. You'll find that many, many people have that bright or that burst of consciousness or awakening after a period of meditation, or they'll hear a voice that says you know they should meditate, then they meditate, and that is what opens up that awareness. So if somebody can get to that point, then reaching that next step is very easy. But not everybody gets there that way. So in my program, I wouldn't say necessarily that's how people get there. Although, because we have a certain amount of time to work together, and I can't really, well, I mean, I could, but I don't really tell them, go meditate for a year and come back and see me. Although that probably would be better, because then they would
Snatch the pebble out of my hand. Like
yeah. So we instead work together while that process is happening. So, they go through my energy transfer process, which is sort of a little bit more accelerated approach to awakening than meditation, let's say. So that happens all throughout the time I work with them. But all the while, we're doing the physical 3D work as well to help them to practice and to move forward. So it's a very structured approach, because there are a group of light workers who I work with at a given time, and they practice with each other to develop their talents and abilities, and I advise them how to do that. So is it smooth? No, because not all of them are in that clear state that you're just describing. And if they were, they probably wouldn't come to me anyway, because they would already have that awareness. So it's a little bit less smooth than how you're describing it, but still we get there. Usually within about 6 months. With most people I work with, we've identified what they're here to do, what they're really good at, and then we train them and develop that talent until it's really defined and refined, and then we put them out into the world doing that. So and I think that's possible for anybody. It's not, I'm not doing anything that extraordinary. It's just the only thing that makes, or the main thing I would say that makes my work with the light workers that I work with so consistent and reliable is that they trust me enough to put them in an uncomfortable spot to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do. So as an example, trying to figure out what you're good at and not using anything you ever learned is a very uncomfortable spot to be in. But they do it anyway because they trust me to advise them to do that. And in that alone, the ego, see, when you let go of all the aspects of what you've learned, a certain amount of your ego dissolves. And in that dissolving of that it gives you access to the wholeness of who you are to a greater extent than you would otherwise. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's a very experiential process that we use to get there.
Oh, it sounds like it, and it sounds like that term, which is very intriguing to me, the energy transfer method. Does that kind of allude to a personal transformation within themselves? You may have just covered that by saying when they let go of everything that they know, and it creates that space. Is that does that sound? Do they go through a transformation? I guess at that point.
Yeah, well, that's I don't know if you're familiar with my work in that area, but that's sort of the foundation of everything that I do, and the organization that I run, the expo and kids programs and all those things. At the core, at the foundation of all of those is consciousness.
Hmm.
So it's sort of an unspoken aspect of all of it, but the so I have an ability with energy. So this is where my unique ability is different from other people. It's not the light worker program, although I'm skilled in that area. It's my ability to be able to remove the density from other people and their energy fields, and also to increase their consciousness through an energetic transfer process. So we do this in local events. We also live stream those on Facebook, and people use YouTube videos of events that I've done all day and night long to facilitate this process. So basically, someone, for example, one of the things that prevent an individual from seeing who they really are is the density in their energy field. Now, density can come from traumas in your life. It could come from poor diet. It could come from past life traumas. And usually it's a combination of all of those things. And that can sort of suppress your consciousness. Now, in most cases, and it can also, a lot of people, when they suffer in their lives, it's a result of this density. And now, in many cases, that density will stay with you throughout lifetimes and you slowly work through it. But this is an area where I have a unique ability to be able to remove that density in a much quicker way. So, as part of my Lightworker program, everyone who I work with, we do 12 of these energy transfer sessions per month that they work with me. And generally, I work with someone over a course of a couple of years, or sometimes a little bit more. So even though on the external, where they're practicing their new talents and doing the physical 3D work, underneath the surface, we're also doing this consciousness development and density removal work. And in combination, that's really what helps their gifts to come to the surface. So that's what that energy transfer is that I was referring to. So yes, their
Hmm.
consciousness expands, their abilities also expand in that process.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it sounds like it's a combination of your energetic gift, your ability, and also kind of a hands-on by them, a hands-on instructive kind of format. Would that be
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, and the energy transfer is not necessarily, doesn't have to be done in person or hands-on necessarily. And as I said, it's not based on, it doesn't have to be done live either. So I do have with the light workers that I work with, it is done live, but it's done live at scheduled times, and I don't actually talk to each individual during those times. But there are people who use YouTube videos from when I've done these events, and they're using it all day and night long. I don't really know that they're using it consciously, but the results are still the same.
Yeah.
So they, it helps an individual to move forward in their life without having to suffer so much.
Yeah. It sounds like too that, through the various things that you've discussed about your program is you're taking these folks to a place because they trust you of, well, vulnerability, and really transparency and authenticity, which sounds like a really great place to start for all of us. But it sounds like that you're taking them to that spot and you're able to do that through the credibility that you have and the trust that they have for you. Would that be correct?
Yeah, I think it's necessary. You have to, if you want to move outside of, and maybe on a side note, I've noticed in working very closely with a lot of people over the years, not only people in my light worker program, but just people who I speak with on regular calls. I speak with people from all over every week. So and because I get so intimately involved in their lives and their journeys, I find out a lot about things that have happened in their lives. And I'm really surprised how many people have had very traumatic experiences in their life. I mean, traumatic experiences that still are playing a role in their lives when they're 50, 60, 70 years old. I mean, you would think that adults are adult, but what I've realized is most adults are just children with older bodies, and they still have the same traumas that they've had when they were younger. So to get past that, usually for most people, it's not easy to just try to figure it out on your own. You have to have, I don't want to say you have to have, but in many cases, it's important to have a mentor or a friend or somebody who you entrust to have your best interests, who can move you in a direction that you can't see for yourself. A lot of the work that I do with light workers is just that, is to address those childhood traumas or things that have happened in the past, and to help them to see it from another vantage point that they wouldn't necessarily ever listen to anybody else tell them about that. But that trust that we have between us allows them to trust me when I suggest different things. And so a lot of that movement that someone has forward is because of that. I think that's really important, that everybody has somebody like that in their life that can see outside of their own experience and be able to guide them to a better version of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And in it through processes like this, I'm just curious. You obviously are creating a lot of illumination within that person and from your person. In this program, do you, because this is, like as you said, these are some old blockages and density complexes that are within the body. Uh, do you find that sometimes it gets a little difficult for them? And I ask this in the spirit of helping everyone who are going through their own thing, which is kind of parallel to what you're doing. This is kind of a microcosm of it, though it's unique in its way. But do you find that there's some level of projection that they kind of resist some of the stuff that's coming to the surface? And if so, do you have a way of kind of dealing that or helping them with that?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, there's always, well, I should say almost always resistance. Because if there wasn't resistance, then it wouldn't be there still.
Sure.
If you've had a trauma in your life, whether it be earlier in this life or in another life, then you're carried that into this one. The only reason it's still there is because there's resistance to it being left behind. So there's almost always resistance, but it varies from person to person how much resistance there is. With some, it's very, very, very extreme amounts of resistance, and with others, it's not as much. So you always hit up against a resistance, and so some people they don't deal with it very well as you're going through that process. But see, again, getting back to the earlier point, when you are with somebody who you trust to know the right way to guide you, if you trust that person enough, then even through the resistance, you will listen to that person. And so, yes, I deal with the resistance all the time, but at the same time, the people that I work with trust me to know that I'm doing this for their best interest and to move them forward. So although some move a little slower than others, they will listen to what I have to say and will change and make adjustments so that they can move past these things. So, and that's true I think for everybody, because I've worked with a variety of people. Now, some of them, they may have emotional, mental breakdowns in the process of fighting up against this. I may say, okay, we need to do this differently, and they may have a breakdown. And this happens a lot over the years. I've worked with people, they'll have some sort of an emotional breakdown, but that's the resistance coming into play. It's the knowing that they need to move beyond this on some subconscious level, but at the same time, the fear and the resistance of letting go causes this breakdown. But often the breakdown is a good thing, because it shows, oftentimes when I don't know if you're familiar with Eckhart Tolle's story, but but in the moment of enlightenment, he was considering suicide. And in that moment of considering suicide, his ego surrendered. And in that surrender, he reached that 0 point, that state of nothingness where he knew where he was meant to be next.
Yeah.
So, this is what happens when a person is faced with their ego, is faced with the reality that they have to let go of this past because they trust this person to take them forward. And so that fight back and forth causes the breakdown. But on the other side of that breakdown comes the surrender to this new path. So that's really important, I think, for a lot of people. So it's a combination of things that we, tools that we put together to make all this happen. But I'm really amazed with the extraordinary transformation the people that I've been connected to over the years have gone through and their journeys, and really become incredible healers and teachers in the spiritual and alternative spaces.
Right on. Yeah, that's a powerful story, and it's contagious. I'm sure that energy is contagious, even without asking. Do you, and with this plethora of this wide, diverse toolkit that you really have, at your hand, within arm's length, being the other, well, the people that you're exposed to, and then I know you've been doing this quite some time. Do you find that these blockages and this density can be released through general practices, or do they have to get real specific about what happened to them, relive these moments, and so on, identify exactly what it is, or is it more of a general clearing? What's your experience on that?
And you don't need to relive the experience. A lot of people do that. I mean, talk therapy is basically that, right? You talk through your trauma until finally the trauma goes away. But talk therapy takes forever in most cases. I think that to release a trauma, you don't even have to re-experience it. If you have a profound spiritual awakening to where your consciousness shifts to an entirely different level of awareness or timeline, you may wake up the next day and you don't even remember these traumas that happened in
Mm,
your life, or they will feel like it happened to somebody else and not you.
mm,
So that can happen, and that sometimes does happen spontaneously to people when they have spontaneous awakenings. So it's not necessary to rehearse your trauma. Um, but there are lots of more mechanical ways. I mean, even meditation is a great way to reach that state. There are, for example, different spiritual centers around the world, such as vortex points or pyramids or other kinds of sacred sites that have
mhm,
very specific energy that if you just spend enough time there, it can cause this radical shift in vibration and release that density. Energy transfer work I do is just one of the many ways, but it's not by any means the only way. And for some people, it can just be they reach a certain point in their life journey where they were always meant to have this happen, and it can just happen spontaneously. I've seen it happen all those different ways. Um, I wouldn't say that talking through it is required at all. No.
yeah. Yeah, this reminds me of the energy of what April Fontana explained to me. I believe it was last night on a show. Well, she's a distance healer, very accomplished, very real, and and it's interesting because she says, people think when I look at your body that I'm seeing all the different parts and everything, and I'm asking questions, what's wrong with the patient, and so on. She said, no, I go into this atmosphere. She calls it the sixth dimension, but it could be anything, basically an atmosphere of divine love, a lot like what you're talking about, some of these vortex sites. And that she basically goes into it without question and just immerses it with herself and aligns with it and becomes it. And whatever information is necessary comes to her. So, to your point, in the same energy of what you're talking about, there is no reliving anything. It's just the information's put before her. She has a gift unique to her, as you do and we all do, and she applies it, and the results speak for themselves. So that's a great explanation. I appreciate that. One of the things that I'm really find interesting and encouraging in what you do is the work you do with children. And I don't know that everybody, and I know you've been out there quite some time, and you're pretty well known, but just real short, can you just kind of summarize what your program is with children?
Well, at the moment, we have a conscious youth program. So if anybody has a child 9 to 18, it's a free program. They can sign up at consciousyouth.org. And we have a facilitator who's Kayla Casey. She's actually someone who's come through my light worker program. And she, every couple of weeks, we have an online class. We use Zoom, actually. So kids from all over the world join a Zoom call. And every other week, it's a teacher who's teaching the kids something. And it could be anything from channeling to auras to healing to any number of subjects. And every other week in between, it's just a kids forum where they get to share with each other and get to know each other, and Kayla facilitates that interaction. So that's the Conscious Youth Program currently. And we have a once a year day camp, which is a 3-day long event that we do here physically in Michigan, and where parents and their kids fly in, and it's a 3-day um, camp education program where we teach them hands-on. In the past, for example, we had classes similar subjects what I just mentioned,
Hmm.
but telekinesis, animal communication. This year we have animal communication, channeling. Michaela Sheldon teaches that. Barb Morey teaches auras and remote viewing. So we teach the kids hands-on over the course of a few days all these different kinds of skills, and they get to meet each other. So many of these kids are kids in our online program who come together once a year to be in this in-person class, and they get to hang out with each other and get to know each other. So they build a little bit of a community. So currently, that the Weekend in Wizardry is what we call that, is in its 3rd year. But we're just now starting to develop our online uh, school program. So that's probably going to take us about a year and a half, maybe 2 years to fully develop. But the plan is to have a school program that's basically to replace conventional education. So it's um, a week-long program, or rather a school year-long program to replace homeschooling or augment homeschooling, essentially.
Yeah.
But we'll be teaching in a more alternative way. So we'll be teaching things like a lot of the subjects I just mentioned, but an entirely different structured environment than what conventional education does, and also bringing a lot of subjects that probably are taught in mainstream education, but taught in the more appropriate way. Because because of our various other conferences and things like that, we have access to archaeologists and people who are on the forefront actually doing the work, as opposed to textbooks in schools, which are outdated and usually incorrect. And we can bring all of these real teachers to these kids to teach them what's really happening in the world and what's really the history of the world and where do we come from, and also teach them things like channeling and extrasensory perceptions and remote viewing and all these things. So that program is in the development stage, or will be in the next couple of weeks. And so in the next year and a half or so, we should have that rolled out to where kids all over the world can join. And that won't be done over Zoom. We're going to build our own education platform. But we'll allow kids to actually be in a structured school program that's going to be much more advanced than anything that's out there right now.
Wow, that's mind blowing. A couple of comments here. Yes, that will be amazing for kids. And what I was thinking, the second one, I'm older, but can I come too? I mean, these things that you're describing, I mean, I would imagine it, yeah, a remote viewing course. I mean, even for adults, that would be very interesting to see what kind of turnout. I would imagine it would be pretty big. Although I think they would be a little, for the most part, because of the condition, they might be a little reluctant to be seen by anybody else to know that they were even participating. But that's fantastic that parents would actually support this type of initiative because it's definitely cutting edge. There's no doubt about it. And if there's one, there's got to be some other ones out there. So this is
Sure,
awesome.
of course.
And even and on that note too, real quick before we leave the kids, yeah, we've run into a few kids, more and more. We're running into them in both, you know, online and not. Especially these really young ones are coming in communicating telepathically, and other things that go along with that. What happens when you get a Zoom room full of kids in an open forum and they talk about whatever they want to talk about, especially having been exposed to the remote viewing and some of the other things you mentioned? Do they have stories that are not so necessarily accepted or talked about in mainstream, but are they able to share that type of thing? Do those things come out?
Well, first of all, I'm these days. I've never facilitated the program myself. I'm sort of the creator behind the scenes, who brings all these things into being. But there are always other people who are overseeing a lot of these programs. Like so I'm not actually in the classes with although Weekend and Wizardry, I'm there the whole weekend, sort of overseeing it. But there are other facilitators who are actually working with the kids and could answer that question more
Mm-hmm.
accurately. But what I will say is, yeah, I mean, in those environments, these kids are extraordinary. I mean, they've had amazing experiences, some not so pleasant. You know, some of them have had extraterrestrial contact or other things that have happened that have not been pleasant. But many of them are very talented in different ways, and are also already gifted. So as most of us were when we were children, but we didn't have the right nurturing or guidance to get us there. So yeah, a lot of those talents are already there. But to answer your earlier point, what about adults? Because we hear this a lot, and every time we put out a kids program, a lot of adults chime in. Is there one for me too? Or I wish I had this when I was a child. I mean, I would have loved to have had something like this when I was a child too. Um, and well, we have our expo, of course, every year that we do. That's sort of our adult version of our kids' weekend wizardry day camp, which is a 3-day intensive for adults. But the long-term goal of our kids' school program, we're going to start with this. The next, I'm doing things incrementally. So we started with the Conscious Youth Online program. Then we are moved to the Weekend Wizardry Day Camp. Next step is to have a year-round school for kids that's online. And then the next step is to start building brick and mortar physical schools at different
Mm-hmm.
parts of the world for kids to physically be in a classroom to learn these things. And in the long term, I am planning on having a university level education for adults that is going to be, more along these lines, but much more advanced education than what's currently out there on a university level. So this is a long-term vision. It's a 20, 30-year plan. We're just taking little steps and every year moving a little further, a little further. But, if we stick around 20, 30 years, then yeah, we will have something for adults.
I don't think they're little steps. I think they're big steps, and that's you just to your teams to be commended for that. I mean, this is and I want to remind everybody, if you don't know, we're talking to a man who I believe, if I memory serves me correctly, when he started this dream, uh, you had quite a bit of difficulty. You lost money putting expos together for I think a couple of years. You had some big debt. You had a lot of big challenges, and you fought through it, and it seems to be paying off. I just have out of curiosity, these kids that are showing up to the things that you're providing, is there a noticeable representation of those children that are being called ADHD, Asperger's, and different things like that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think those symptoms are, in my opinion, and actually Kayla Casey spoke about that a little bit at the talk that she gave recently. She's an educator by profession. She actually comes from a mainstream education background, but now she's working with gifted kids. And in her research and also working with these kids, she's come to the opinion that a lot of autistic children, they are more advanced children. And
Yeah.
now, when you get to an extreme level of autism, they may be so advanced and so hypersensitive that they can't quite function in this world yet.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they can't function. But because we're living in a electromagnetic soup in our most Western cultures, and there's so many stimulants in the environment and diet and such. Kids that are that sensitive have a hard time coping in that world. So many of these children are extraordinarily advanced spiritually and gifted, but they just don't know how to function well in this reality. Now, there's also another level too. A lot of times those kids are there to teach their parents through the autism that they have, to help the parents to evolve as well. So it's always a more complex tapestry of a life journey than as simple as saying, all autistic children are advanced kids. But I would say that would be the case, that majority of them are they're that way for a reason. So when you have the extreme level of autism or ADD or ADHD, it's because they just are so sensitive they can't cope in this reality. But I also think, what we've categorized as ADD or ADHD, for example, they're just the vibration of the planet is accelerating. And that's why we're seeing so many innovations happening in modern times, not only in technology, but also in consciousness. Well, as that vibration of the planet expands, we're going to see more and more hyperactive ADD, quote unquote, kids, because they're matching that vibration. They're here to create on a much faster level than 50 years ago what children would have been able to do. And what's happening is adults are categorizing them as having something wrong with them because they're a little hyper. When in fact, if you just let them discover or guided them in the direction of how to use that immense amount of potential to create in the world, our world could leap forward in a huge way. So I think by suppressing them with drugs and labeling them as something wrong is really causing society to get stuck and become stagnant as well. So I don't think there's really anything wrong with that. And I would say probably a lot of the most brilliant people throughout time who have done the most amazing things probably were ADD before such a label was even around.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that was my hunch when I posed the question. I had a feeling, just as the things I've been observing lately. I want to just throw another comment in there from Jeanette. She says, "Sign me up!" Exclamation point. I might be 80, but that's okay. So, so and along that line, what do you have coming up? Is there anything you'd like to announce that you're doing, so people can, and also I think, yeah, the name of the website or wherever we could find you, the information, that type of thing.
Sure. Well, there are multiple websites. If any kids, or if they have any kids that are interested in our Conscious Youth program, 9 to 18, you can go to consciousyouth.org and sign up there. And we have those every 2 weeks. They're free to attend for the kids. And then our Weekend in Wizardry is weekendinwizardry.com and .org. And that is coming up in July. And that's an in-person program here in Michigan. So they can go there and check that out. We don't have all of the teachers and classes updated yet, but we will soon. So they can go and check those out in the meantime. But probably within the next couple of weeks, that'll be ready to go. So if they're interested in signing up their child for that, they can do that there. Our expo, which is our sort of our adult version of our kids camp, is coming up in November, and that's a 3-day weekend intensive. Lots of very good educational stuff there. Like we have archaeologists, and we have like Michaela Sheldon is channeling there, and lots of interesting subject material. But really, what makes our conference different is, as I said earlier, there's a vibrational element that's at the foundation of it. So when people come to that conference, yes, they will learn interesting things, but really they go away an entirely different person. That transformation you mentioned earlier in our call, that's why our conference exists. So so many people, sometimes if you're really sensitive to the energy, it may be a little overwhelming being there, but that's really the purpose of our conference, and that's at awakenedempoweredexpo.com. And of course, we have our YouTube channel, which is AAE TV, Awaken Empowered TV. and you can just search that on YouTube and find that. And if you're interested in my Lightworker program, EthannFox.com for that. We have way too many websites for everything we do, but those are just the main.
It's a high class problem. It'll work itself out. It's always a pleasure talking to you. It's always such a fluid
Thank you.
conversation, and I'm really amazed. Uh, to a degree, I'm amazed at what you're accomplishing. I know that many people are pushing the outside of the envelope now. You've got a lot of traction, and you've come a long way. And so Godspeed to you and all your people and your organization, and to the kids, because I have a feeling when that university opens up, a lot of them are going to be very young professors. And
Probably that's what I'm counting on.
yeah, I can see your vision. I can see your vision. Uh, Best to you. All blessings to you and yours.
Thank you.
Thank you
You
so
too.
much for sharing space with us and honoring us with your presence again. And I look forward
Thank you.
to future collaborations. You take care, Ethan.
Take
Thank you
care.
so much. All right. Bye bye. Thank you, everybody, for coming in.